It takes a special kind of game to be remembered and revered years after its initial release. But here, standing tall and holding hands are not one but two of the PS2's biggest hits, Shadow of the Colossus and ICO. Let's take a look at the Team ICO HD collection and see how these two classic behemoths have stood the test of time. Shadow of the Colossus places you in the well-worn leather sandals of Wander, a boy who travels to a forbidden land in order to bring a young girl back to life. To do so, he will need to destroy 16 massive mythical beings on behalf of a mysterious entity named Dorman, armed only with a stolen sword, a bow, and his trusty horse Agro. Ico tells the story of the titular young boy, born with horns on his head, considered to be a bad omen by his village. Imprisoned in an abandoned castle, he meets Yorda, a fragile, childlike princess that he needs to help escape from the shadowy creatures in order to free them both. Both games showcase storytelling in its most minimal and simplistic form, but that doesn't mean they don't pack a surprisingly strong emotional punch. Much like the storytelling, the gameplay of both Ico and Shadow of the Colossus is incredibly simple and incredibly absorbing. The meat of Shadow comes in cycles. You start off at a central temple, ride forth and find and destroy the latest Colossus before ending back where you started to rinse and repeat. The skill comes in finding each monster's weak spot and exploiting it, whether that's forcing them to come down to your level or taking the fight to their dizzying heights. Ico is a perfect little puzzle solver, where you need to keep Yorda safe from harm whilst figuring out how to put your best foot forward. Like a good book you just can't put down, you'll find yourself attempting to complete them in a single sitting. Graphically, both titles were groundbreaking when they first came out, but a high-definition repackaging doesn't seem to have done them many favours. Sure, everything looks cleaner and crisper, but they lost that murky, muddy and overexposed look that just added to their otherworldly atmosphere. Without it, some of the less appealing visuals are much more noticeable. It's a shame more work didn't go into Agro's mane and tail and Shadow too, when much of that game is spent looking at the backside of your loyal horse. So, what do these games offer that no other game has since? Shadow's biggest gimmick is the fact that every monster you fight, and indeed seemingly the only living creatures in the land aside from you and your horse, are gigantic. Other titles seem to think that we want to take down enemies the size of a zombie chihuahua, but we don't want to pick on someone our own size. Here's what we really want: a genuine challenge. Ico, by contrast, is a game with little threat but huge stakes, and its fairy tale setting and charm never fail to captivate. So, how do we rate the Team ICO collection? Well, let's start by taking a look at what hasn't held up so well. Both games, aside from the slight spit and polish they've received, are pretty much completely unchanged from their PS2 days, meaning that the clunky controls, temperamental camera and short lengths are all still present and will irritate as they did the first time around. The biggest disappointment of the collection is the HD revamp itself though. It just isn't as beautiful as we'd hoped for. But on the plus side, it's Ico and Shadow of the Colossus, two of Sony's best loved and most iconic games, brought together on one handy disc. Minimal narrative and atmospheric setting are what make these games stand out in your memory, as well as the cinematic visuals and jaw-droppingly beautiful terrain. Whether riding across a vast expanse with the wind in Wander's hair, or scaling a windmill atop an island by the sea, this is how games are supposed to feel: epic and ethereal. We loved Ico and Shadow of the Colossus the first time we played them many moons ago. And, if it's possible, in all the years that have passed and the many games that have graced our consoles since, now we love them even more. If you haven't had the pleasure yet, do yourself this colossal favour.